Welcome to Uniquely Qualified. I'm your friend and host, Liz Ficken, and I'm so glad you're here. Uniquely Qualified is a podcast that empowers guests to share their experience, strength, and hope in overcoming challenges in the spirit of mutual healing. We hope you'll leave feeling more aware, connected, and supported in navigating the human experience. Today's guest is my new friend, Jessi. I'm thrilled to shine a light on this wonderful human and her experiences. Jessi lives in Washington State with her husband, son, and dogs. In her spare time, she enjoys connecting in the outdoors and is an active volunteer for She Jumps, a nonprofit organization that aims to increase the participation of women and girls in outdoor activities and inspires them to jump beyond their limitations. Jessi's favorite things include skiing, mountain biking, and hiking. When she's not outside, Jessi works as an occupational therapist assistant in trauma rehab, as well as coaching strength and conditioning classes at an all women's gym. Welcome to the podcast, Jessi.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for having
Oh,
me.
I'm so glad you're here. And so I guess we'll just get right to it. Jessi, what makes you uniquely qualified?
What makes me uniquely qualified is my lived experiences.
Yeah, your lived experiences. Well, I'm eager to get into those. Why don't we just let's start with talking about some of the relationships in your life and your family system. Tell me a little bit about that, about the
Yeah.
people that mean the most to you.
Yes, yes. So, first of all, first and foremost, my husband. We've been married for 5 years now, but we actually are high school sweethearts, which is, I feel like, kind of rare. I don't know. So, I like to share
Yeah,
that little tidbit because, a lot of people, you grow and you change, and we've been really fortunate to grow together.
it's great.
And then we have our sweet son, who is a year and a half, and he was born hearing impaired. And that has become a huge part of our lives, of
Mhm.
course. I feel like I'm already getting off from your from your
No,
initial question, but
no, you're
um,
you're introducing the people that matter to you.
yeah. So about a year and a half ago, right before my son was born, our whole family dynamics kind of started to shift a bit. Around that point in time, quite frankly, my whole world kind of fell apart. Oh my gosh, I'm already getting choked up.
It's
I wasn't
okay.
expecting that.
It
Um,
was a lot. You've lived through a lot, Jessi. Lived through a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you for validating that. Yeah, so I lost my grandmother, who was my best friend, 10 days after my son was born. And then about 2 weeks after my son was born, we lost my dad to a fight with cancer. And it was pretty quick and not pretty if you've known anyone
Hmm.
that has had to fight cancer. He was young and really excited to be a grandfather. That was a traumatic one. That one was hard to sit with, and it still is, to be really honest.
Both of those.
But
Go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to talk over
no, it's
you.
okay. I was just gonna say, in the midst of that, we got our son, and he's incredible.
Yeah, I feel like, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge how sorry I am that you lost your grandma and your dad, especially so close together and in conjunction with the birth of your son. Feel like sometimes the joy of like happy things in life, when they coincide with grief, they make both of those things like that much more intense. And I don't know if that resonates
Hmm.
with you,
It
but
does.
yeah, and so just I'm imagining that point in your life, and it sounds so intense.
I actually love that you said that because I remember one day feeling like so confused in my own emotions because
Hmm.
I mean, postpartum, your hormones you're already a little crazy regardless of what's
Yeah.
going on in your life. But I remember in one specific moment with my son, just smiling and laughing at him because I don't remember what he'd done for the first time or was just being
Hmm.
precious, who knows? And then just instantly bawling, like this gut
Yeah.
wrenching bawl, like, one of those cries where it just like hurts. And the rest of that day, like processing the fact I'd never experienced before such great joy, such deep, deep joy. I mean,
Hmm.
pure like ecstasy, right? At the same time as gut wrenching pain and suffering. I had never experienced them cohesively in trying to, learning that that's okay took me a while. And yeah, just living in those feelings and like letting those feelings come and having a good cry and
Hmm.
acknowledging the fact that like I'm having some of the worst days of my life
Hmm.
also while having some of the best days of my life. It was really tough, but I think ultimately just a blessing that I had my son, because if I didn't have that little ray of sunshine to keep me looking up, I think it would have been even harder.
Hmm. And I know that we're going to spend most of our time today talking about what you've navigated with your son, but is there anything you want our listeners to know about the woman that was your grandma and the man that was your father?
My gosh, I love
Is
them
that a
both
little too
so
much?
much.
Okay, okay.
No, they both were incredible people. My grandmother and I were besties for the resties. We
Mm,
told her everything, and she was hilarious. I would always FaceTime her at bachelorette parties, and everyone just loved her. I mean, you didn't meet my grandma and not love her. And my dad was incredible. He is the reason that I love the outdoors. I was always out with all the boys. He very much so raised me with the mindset of it didn't matter that I was a girl. He's like, no,
totally.
he had me doing all the things he loved doing, which are all things I love now.
Yeah.
And he would have done anything for my brother and I. And
Mm,
it just, yeah, we feel robbed, to be really honest. And it still stings. And I think, probably for the rest of our lives. But I just
yeah.
try to make him proud. And I know
Yeah.
he did not want us crying over him or feeling sorry for him. And so just trying to find happiness and live life really fully for him.
Well, I know I never met either of them,
Oh,
but I know that they are really proud of you. And
sure.
I also know that they would be really happy that you're choosing to take up to a platform like this podcast to and be brave and to share your truth. I just from what you've shared with me, I have no doubt that they'd be like, "Yeah, Jessi, you go girl." I don't know if your dad would say you go girl.
Thank you, he would.
I love that so much. So you experience all this pain at the same time, all this joy. And tell me a little bit about when there were indications that maybe Parker wasn't a typical baby.
Yeah. So it all goes back to birth. Well, this is a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast, my birth story. So I'll just keep it really
Ooh,
short and sweet.
I would love to do a
Um,
bunch of birth stories, so we'll get you back for that.
it was quite eventful, to say the least. But I always tell people when I am sharing my birth story, their faces, their jaws always kind of drop. They're like, wow, that's really traumatic. And I always am like, I don't feel like it was traumatic. I don't look back on that like, oh, that was a traumatic experience. I have a healthy son. I am here to tell you our tales today. Like, that's all you can hope for. And though we had really unfortunate things occur during our labor, we had all the best possible outcomes.
Hmm.
And so I look back on it and all I see is just like blessings, because we were so fortunate. Someone was looking
Hmm.
out for both of us.
Hmm.
Um, so in labor, I had preeclampsia, which basically you're hypertensive, your blood pressure is really high, which is very dangerous for you and baby. And then I developed HELLP syndrome, which is a rare but fatal condition that can happen to women in labor, or even before labor. Actually, you can develop
Okay.
HELLP syndrome. Which, for all the mamas out there, people that are thinking about conceiving someday, I had some signs and indicators. But you're pregnant for your first time, you don't know what's normal, what's not. But I had some really sharp like abdominal pain. It was kind of higher
Hmm.
actually than abdominal, and to the point, I remember one time driving with my husband and I just like was holding onto the side and I couldn't even breathe because it was so sharp. Turns out that's
Mm.
a sign of a HELLP syndrome. And blurred vision, my vision just going black. And that's because my blood pressure was sky high.
Oh my goodness.
So, anyways, I got HELLP syndrome. So, your red blood cells end up basically attacking each other, destroying each other. You have elevated liver enzymes, and then your platelet count drops. So you're at risk for stroke, is the number one thing that usually gets people, or liver rupture. And then you're most likely going to hemorrhage. Now they have interventions for these things, right? But it was happening so quick, they didn't have time to provide some of these interventions for me. Thankfully, my son came out really fast, which ended up saving us both. But I did hemorrhage, and again, another story for another time. But we ended up having a prolonged hospital stay because of me. Our son was born perfectly healthy. Everything was great with him. But because we were in there for an extended period, he got to have a couple newborn hearing screenings done. Anytime you have a baby, they're going to do a newborn hearing screening. If it doesn't happen immediately after birth, they're going to have you come back in the next few days to screen their hearing. And they do this, they call it AMR, or I'm sorry, ABR, auditory brainstem response, which
Okay.
is really fascinating. They put these little like electrode pads kind of like down on their neck and on their head, and they send sounds through their little tiny, cute little
Oh
baby
my
ears. And they
gosh.
actually read the nerve responses through these pads, which to me, I'm like, are you even doing anything right now? Like, there's no way that's actually working. That's so
That's
crazy.
wild. Yeah.
So we had two of those while we were in the hospital, and he failed them both. And everyone was saying, no worries. He came out so fast. So your baby's sitting in fluid for 9 months, right? So in
Mm.
typical labor, from what I learned, what I gathered is you have a longer time contracting, baby's getting pushed through that birth canal, and those fluids like work their way out, right?
Okay.
My son literally came out in 2 pushes just very quickly. And so everyone kept telling us, like, oh, there's fluid in his ears, no sweat. And it
Okay.
wasn't even talked about really. So they had us come back to the hospital. Same thing, very laid back. After going through what we went through, like I realized like just how laid back this was. Like we went into the L&D
Uh-huh.
unit still, just walked into a postpartum room. They had the little computer set up. Another woman did our ABR test again. And at the end, she looked at me and said, "Oh, honey, he did better this time." And knowing what I know now, I think she just said that because she could tell I was about to break. At this
Mm.
point, my grandma had just died and my dad was being put on hospice,
Ooh.
and I was like really feeling very fragile in this moment. And we were talking about being moms and all these things. And I think she could just tell by the look on my face. I wouldn't look at her or my husband because I knew if I made eye contact with anybody, I was just going to lose it all right on that
Uh,
L&D floor. So he fails again, and they refer us to our local children's hospital to see an audiologist. Am I talking too fast?
you're doing great.
Okay.
I think your rate of speech is great.
Okay. So we go to our local children's hospital for a 2-hour test. They warned us it's going to be 2 hours, and the baby has to sleep the entire time because, again, they're still doing this ABR style of test.
Hmm.
As kids get older, there's different options, but when they're this little, when they're newborns like this, they have to do an ABR. So if you can't get your baby to stay asleep, they will sedate them, which I was not excited for. So
Yeah.
I had my mama will and determination that I was going to get my baby to sleep through this whole test. And we did. We just nursed the whole time. But let me back up a little bit actually and kind of paint a picture for folks that are listening, because most of you, if not all of you, have probably never had this experience before. And I just want to paint a visual. But you walk in to the audiologist office and there's a box. It's not a, I don't even want to call it a room. It's a box. So you walk into a big room, and inside the room is a box.
A
And it's,
telephone booth. Sorry, I don't mean to be interrupting. You're
it,
just so
no, please do interrupt. I, I want to say yes, but no, it's not like a telephone booth. It's larger than that. So
okay.
think like bomb shelter box. So like
Oh.
the outside is metal. It's metal. You walk in, the walls are padded, and there's like a couple little toys in there for older kids, like one little chair for a toddler, and then a padded rocking chair in there. And I don't mean like the nice padded rocking chair you have in your nursery. I'm talking like a sterile hospital padded
Hmm.
rocking chair.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so you go into this box, and the second you go in, the first time you go into one, it's very disorienting for a hearing person because there's absolutely no sound in there. Like there's no echo. And you don't think that would be weird until you experience it and you realize how much kind of like auditory feedback you're always processing. And then you step into this noise canceling box, and it kind of makes you feel like, even still to this day, we go so much. I'll talk about this more later, but the gene that my son has is progressive in some children, meaning that it could get worse. So we still test every 3 months, and still every time we go into the box, it kind of takes me a minute. It almost makes you feel like vertigo-y for a second because you're just a
Hmm.
little disoriented. So we go into the box, and at this point, my husband and I honestly hadn't even spoken about our son and the fact that we were going to the children's hospital and that he'd failed all these tests. We hadn't even discussed it because at this point now, my dad had just died that week,
Mm,
or the end of the prior week. And like I kind of touched on, his death was really traumatic, and we got to be there with him, which I wouldn't change that for the world, but we just had a lot on our plates.
yeah.
And I didn't want to talk about something and create more worry and stress for myself for something that we didn't even know if it was a thing yet. And I already barely had the energy to get up and take care of myself with my basic needs. I didn't have the capacity to even have that conversation personally.
Well, and I also know just when people are in grief, like in that fresh grief stage, like I imagine you were with your grandma and then your dad, it's like things like following even the most basic recipe, not going to happen. It is literally like one foot in front of the other.
That's my mantra. I say that all the
Oh,
time.
really?
Yes,
Yeah.
one foot in front of the other. When I say that, that's so funny you said that. I say that all the time. So I intentionally sign myself up for really hard things at least once a year. Whether I'm
Hmm.
summiting a mountain, I'm running a half marathon, I'm going to do something that really pushes me. And I use that mantra in those situations, but also literally, even when I am feeling like going through those really, really dark, dark days, I remember just telling myself, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the
Yeah.
other. Like you're
Yeah.
so close to that summit, just one foot in front of the other, and it's gonna get better.
Hmm.
Um,
And it's awesome that you have the experience of doing that in the mountains. I've experienced that myself where it's like, okay, like it's physically just one step. Okay, just one more
mhm.
step. But then I'm just thinking about when we as humans go through acute grief and everything feels kind of blurred and hazy and you're exhausted and you're like, am I physically exhausted or is this just how mentally tired I am or both or existentially exhausted maybe? Where it's that one foot in front of the other. And so I guess that's I was trying to highlight like of course you didn't talk to your husband where it's not like okay let's see what are things we need to get done today talk about this doctor's appointment. It's like survival mode.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not sleeping on top of that, right? And you have, yeah,
And you're freshly postpartum.
just the sprinkle of postpartum hormone
Yeah,
depletion on top.
yeah, yeah. So I guess it makes complete sense to me that you arrive, you're at the children's hospital, you're seeing the box for the first time, and it sounds like that's when you're kind of realizing, oh, we haven't really talked about this. Is that correct?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we both go into the box, the bombshell 3 box. And I just remember being so sweaty the whole
Mm.
time. You're in this tiny little box. I'm breastfeeding the entire time, keeping this baby sleeping on me. And I was wearing like long pants and a long shirt. And I don't know, it's just funny when you have these like moments in life where your world kind of stops. I don't know, at least for me personally, I just remember like really specific details. And I just remember feeling like just crawling in my own skin the whole time because I just was just physically and emotionally, I was just overwhelmed. I was
Mm.
just, yeah, that's really actually hard to
Well,
find the words.
yeah, yeah, you were just, period.
I was just,
I'm imagining that they're probably can't permit for much airflow in there, right? Because they're trying to cap.
mm-mm,
So that
no,
would I would imagine that would
there's no
make
airflow.
people sweaty plus hormones.
Hormones, oh my gosh, the way you sweat when you're postpartum. Yeah.
I myself haven't experienced that, but I do know that like no matter like just seems like women hormones, there's sweat
Sweat.
no matter where you are. This is like what stage? It's like get a little schwitz
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But it also can be I would imagine if you're not expecting it to feel this way, you haven't like had the conversation with your husband, and then you're sweating. That like for me, things that impact my breathing and things that make me sweat when I don't expect it, I'm like something's wrong, and it
Yes.
makes me
Okay. Yes.
anxious.
And I
Yeah,
think that's why I said that because I just remember like everything was so uncomfortable. I
totally.
was just totally spiraling in my own head. And I just remember I could not get comfortable because I just was so sweaty, so hot, so sweaty. And just,
Mm.
yes, everything you just said. I was just,
Are you a little claustrophobic too? Not, I don't mean to be like belaboring. So
I
there,
am
so
claustrophobic. And so is my husband. But the box is not like you can stand inside the box. You can stand
okay,
up.
okay.
And we've had like, yeah. So my husband and I sat in there with my son one time and it's okay. I mean, you could like I can sit in the rocking chair and like stick my arms straight out and still like be pretty close to touching the wall, but not quite.
Okay. It still sounds really small.
It's not great. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
great. Not a ton of extra space, but I'm not claustrophobic enough that I feel that it acts up in the box. The box. I'm sure they have a specific term for it. I'll have to ask our audiologist next time we go in.
Yeah, and please report back to me.
I will. So back to his test. So we're doing his test. The first thing that they test for is any blockages, so any fluids or anything in the ear. And I don't remember how long that took, but that's the first test they do. And you're in the metal box, right, with the padded walls, and then it's sit in front of you. So there's a door kind of on the left side of the wall, and then on the right side of that front wall is a glass window. And that's where the audiologist sits. And she can talk to you through a microphone into the box. And she says, okay, good news, no blockages. And I'm like, good news. Okay. And I remember in that moment making eye contact with my husband and kind of having a nonverbal exchange of like, crap. Because
Yeah.
this whole time we've been being told, don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah, he keeps failing, but don't worry. It's fluid. It's just fluid.
So then
Which
that's
I've
off the table. Oh, go ahead.
It's off the table. It's eliminated. Yeah, that's she's everything looks good there. Which after listening to other podcasts and just talking to other moms of children with hearing impairments or hearing differences, that's a very common thing that you're pushed, that initial testing. Oh, it's just fluid. It's just fluid. They should really stop saying that so much. Anyways, so then we continue with the testing, and it was a true 2 hours in the box. And we come out and sit down in chairs with her. And I just remember her telling us, okay, well, it looks like your son has a severe hearing impairment. Then I kind of blacked out. I just remember crying immediately. And my first feelings, I just actually I kind of went into a panic in immediate blame. And I
Oh.
remember telling the audiologist, like, oh my gosh, when I was 6 months pregnant, I found out that my dad is dying. And I was so emotional every day. Like, this is my fault. Like, I had such bad anxiety and depression and was just so freaked out every day in fight or flight because of everything that was going on around me, like the trauma that I was experiencing caused this in my son. And she was like, no, honey, no. And then I said, okay, but I work at a gym and I was there like 5, 6 days a week throughout my pregnancy, and the music is so loud. Like, that has to be it, like the loud music. And she was like, no, no. Like, at that point, she kind of like, had a soft giggle and was like, no, like your baby is so safe inside all that fluid in your tummy. This is not your fault. Like, you didn't do anything wrong here, even though really we didn't know anything about why he had hearing loss yet. And also going back to that test in the hospital where the woman told me he did better this time. She later I talked about this with our audiologist, and she just started giggling and she said, I think she was just trying to make you feel better because you can't tell that on those basic hospital tests, which it makes me laugh now. Now I can look at it and laugh like, oh, I must have really looked pretty pitiful in that moment.
Yeah, it seems like you had a couple experiences of well-intentioned people that were
Mm-hmm.
trying to help you out, where it's like, okay, but you misled me.
Completely. Yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
I do
Um,
appreciate that that provider didn't like leave you hanging with your own desire to claim accountability for what was going
mm,
on with your son. I
oh
feel
yeah.
like anecdotally with mom friends or just hearing about the experience of motherhood, so many women are just like, I did something, I must have done something wrong. My
Completely.
choices have impacted my child, where it's like, not always, babe.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
which was
always.
really good. I am really grateful for her, even still to this day. And she, again, we see her so often, and she not only has a wonderful relationship with our son now, but she's watched me go through it, And
Yeah.
I absolutely lost it in her office that day and told her, I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know if this is normal, but my dad also just died. And I just like am feeling like, how can this be real life right now? And she actually made me feel really nice. She said, no, like you're really strong for handling all that. And it's with nothing else going on in their life, have this exact same reaction.
Totally. Totally. I mean, honestly, Jessi, any one of those things that you experienced in the months leading up to this moment, for any individual person or family, that's so much. And then you have it all
Mhm.
just like one, two, three, I'm gonna say four when you get this. Four
Yeah,
plus.
it was a lot in a really condensed amount of time. That
Mm-hmm.
is for sure. Yeah, so we found out that he was severely hearing impaired that day. Of course, my initial thoughts were like, oh, this was me, right? Like already
Mm-hmm.
trying to find a cause for this. And yeah, those next, go ahead. What were you going to
I
say?
was just gonna ask if that was your son's official diagnosis. Is
Yes.
that okay? So that's what his chart would say.
Severely hearing loss.
Okay.
And they had us come back. I don't remember the dates, but they had us come back to retest pretty soon after that, and then also fit him for some hearing aids.
Oh, it must be
Yes,
so tiny.
there, I saved his first molds, his first ear molds, because he was what, almost 4 months old when we got them, or he was 4 months old when we got them. I put them in his baby book just because they are so tiny and so cute.
I'm like just thinking, imagining that. I'm getting little teary eyed. I'm like little
Yeah.
tiny, tiny 4-month-old hearing aids. That's
And
so
even just
sweet.
seeing a 4 month old with his little hearing aids in, just so sweet. So that night we got home. Oh, so yeah, so we got told he has a severe hearing impairment. And that was pretty much it. I mean, I don't want to make our audiologist sound like she wasn't helpful, because she was extremely helpful, but it's like such a huge thing to be told. And
Totally.
then you're sent home with this like 4 inch thick spiral book. And that's called, what is it called? A resource notebook for families of deaf children. You get sent home
Whew.
with that.
Little light
And
reading, huh?
then it's like, okay, bye. See you in a couple weeks to get his hearing aids.
Ooh, wow. What?
And you go home and you're like,
Whoa.
okay, well. So I was spiraling. That night I stayed up.
Yeah.
I actually don't even think I slept at all that night, to be honest. And I just started watching YouTube videos on ASL. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn ASL. Here we go.
Here we go.
And I still remember the exact video I watched that night by my
Uh-huh.
guy, Bill, who I'll talk about later, my favorite ASL teacher. Yeah. And then I just decided to hit the road running.
Do
And
you remember what you first learned? Like that night, or was it just like I'm doing something, the action of consuming YouTube videos is what I'm doing, or did you actually did you learn anything? Do you remember?
yeah, I did. I learned, hi, how are you? I'm learning ASL. I
Yes.
understand. I don't understand.
These are
And
all great things to know how to say in
there was
any language.
there was other stuff in the video too, but those are the biggest ones that I remember, like going
Mm-hmm.
over and over again, like, okay, introductions, But yeah, I just hit the ground running. I don't know. I've always had the mindset of, even everything that had happened, like that was undoubtedly the hardest season of my life. Want to relive those days. I'm still processing things and working through things that I lived through in that time. And yeah, quite frankly, it was the lowest I think I've ever felt in my entire life. And just the hardest times I've ever had to navigate. But I've always believed and felt that I've lived through other hard experiences before this, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand that hard times are going to come and go. Like life
Mm-hmm.
is never going to be always easy. And honestly, going through hard things, I feel like, is what gives you more character. It just, if you can flip your mindset on like, wow, I get this like new refreshed look on life. Like, yeah, I lost my dad, but wow, what a gift. And now I understand just how precious life is, and you never know how quickly it's going to be taken from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this new hard thing in my lap right now. And yeah, I could sit on it and pout and say, oh, poor us, or whatever. Oh, poor me. I'm going through so many things right now. Or I can just strap my boots up and hit the ground running and like make things work. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to sit around and wait for someone to come help us. I'm just going to grab the bull by the horns and saddle up.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Did you already have that? Was that the conversation you were having with yourself? Was like, I've gone through hard stuff before. I can do this, or is this looking back that you've arrived at what you said, which was so beautiful?
I think both. I had those thoughts in those moments, and I knew what I had to do, especially in regards to our son. But in terms of like myself navigating things personally, I had some really, it wasn't that cut and clean cut. And I want people listening to know that too. Like that, I didn't wake up just like, oh, I'm going to strap up my boots and go. I
Yeah.
remember one day just bawling and looking at my husband and telling him I'm Michelle. I don't have anything inside me anymore. I am a shell and I need help. And I started counseling, and yeah, it was there. I had that drive. Like I
Mm-hmm.
knew my life was worth living, and I had this son, right? That I wanted to show up for and be my best self. And now I will always give him the best life he can have. But especially now, like we have these extra things. They're not barriers, they're not hardships, but we have these extra new things that I need to learn. There's nothing wrong with him. I need to learn some new things here. And there's really no time to waste. So I always
Mm-hmm.
had that in my mind. But yeah, it wasn't always that resilient sounding. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely had some really, really low, hard times where I wasn't strapping my boots up tight. I was cheering for myself for getting up and brushing my teeth that morning.
Yeah. I feel like when in life we go through anything that's significantly challenging, like the multiple things that you were going through, it's also just not linear. I feel like that comes up. You talk about
Mm-mm.
grief, and it's like maybe one morning you're like, boots are on, time to take on the world, gonna learn ASL. And the next you're like you said, okay, toothpaste on the toothbrush. Good job, me. All right, now we're brushing the teeth. We're doing like where it's like
Mm-hmm.
that one step in front of the other.
Yeah. Which I'm
Mm-hmm.
so glad you elaborated on that more, because that's still, there is nothing wrong with my son. He is perfect. There is nothing
Yes.
wrong with anyone who's deaf. They're
Mm-hmm.
perfect. But that doesn't mean that as a mom, like I have leaned into this. I love this. I have thoroughly enjoyed this entire experience. My son has opened up a whole new world to me, and I'm so grateful for that. But that doesn't mean that there still aren't nights where I'm laying in bed crying at midnight because I'm worried about him going to school, and I'm worried about him being bullied, and I'm worried about how things might look different for him because he can't hear, and how he might struggle with some ththings because he can't hear. Um, that doesn't mean I don't have those moments there,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah.
I think it's an important, I appreciate you saying that. And I think it's an important thing to acknowledge where I think sometimes, especially in a world where we have social media and we have like, capacity to literally share highlight reels. Look at my great day. Look at my pretty hike. Look at this great meal.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not like, oh, and also I cried a lot yesterday and I'm dreading doing this really hard thing that I have to do tomorrow. And so I think sometimes people get these perceptions of those of us that maybe get labeled like resilient or wow, you really got
Mm-hmm.
through that.
You're
It's
so
like you're
strong.
so strong. Where it's like I'm forgetting who said this quote, but it's like the end of a poem, and it says, "Beautiful people don't just happen." Where it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you don't just like go point A to point Z, and that's it. There's a lot of that struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and that's honestly part of why I wanted to start this podcast, where it's not just highlight reel. We often see people like you, and people admire the strength that they see in you, but they don't see the sleepless nights. They don't see all the tears that you've cried.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just important that we
Totally.
acknowledge that, especially in a situation
Mm-hmm.
like yours, where like I love everything that you've said about your son in terms of he is perfect and babies are perfect. And each of us, we have to navigate the world as it's constructed in our own way. And you gave birth to a son who is navigating a world that is made for able-bodied people, people who can hear fine, who aren't impacted. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about like seeing the world differently, that just what comes to mind to me is, yeah, the world that you and I experience, we only perceive it through our own lens. Trying to not make like a here
Completely.
I'm trying not to make it like a visual, like a about like actual
Yeah.
seeing, but a lot of metaphors there. But you know what I mean? Where
Completely.
and so when you were wanted to come and talk, I was really excited because I thought, oh my gosh, there are. I'm looking at my notes here. 3 in 1,000 babies born in the U.S. have a hearing loss on an annual basis, right? Yep. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, every thousand there's three. Sorry, every
Mm-hmm.
thousand babies there are three that have hearing loss. So if we want to be good community members, then paying attention to things like, okay, which members of our community might not be able to hear, and
Mm-hmm.
how do we show up and hold space with them and be a good member of their
Completely.
community, a good family member. So
Or even just communication in general, too. There's a lot of children, like, also, that have other medical things, like, maybe on the spectrum or something, that also their communication styles just look different than us. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong, it's just
mm-hmm.
their form of communication.
That's a great point. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I keep feeling I keep taking us away from from your story though.
No, that's great. And on that note, too, what you were talking about kind of at the beginning there, I was speaking with about sharing highlights, right? Like we all want to share
Mhm.
our highlights, of course. I was hesitant about sharing our journey at first just because of my son and how he might feel about that. Once I did share briefly, beautiful things started happening and connections were formed. And I'm really glad that we did open up. And of course, you're only going to want to share the good parts, right? Like you want to celebrate things that you're proud of, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that those hard moments aren't there when navigating these things. And I was talking with a good friend of mine whose son is on the spectrum, and we can relate in that sense. Like already being a mom, you want to do everything you can for your child. You want your child,
Hmm.
of course, to have the best life, the most fulfilling life naturally, right? And then you add in these other layers. Again, not that there's no negative association with these layers, but there's just more layers, right? Every kid is unique in their own way. And we were just talking one day about just kind of the stresses of the weight that you carry. And she said to me, we can be doing everything we possibly can, and we're always going to feel like it's not enough. And
Mm.
that was a really, I don't know if she truly understands how impactful that statement was that she made to me, because it was such a good reminder. It's one of those things, same thing, like one foot in front of the other. It's one of those mantras that I just kind of say in my head now, like, because I will have so many resources lined up for my son. And then again, I'm laying in bed that night still looking up more. Where else can we go? What else can we do? What other groups can I get connected with? Like, how can I get him as much exposure to the deaf community as possible? And it's a good reminder for myself and any other moms out there, like give yourself grace. You're doing a great job and you want to provide as much as you can, and you could be doing it all. I can have him going to
Hmm.
20 flipping groups a day, and
Hmm.
I'm still going to go to bed at night feeling like I'm not doing enough, and it's just because I love my child so much, and I want him to have the best life.
Hmm.
But I also need to give myself grace in those moments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate you when you were saying like of course of course highlight reels exist I'm a big believer in celebrating all your wins and even like your missed attempts. If you're brave enough to try something, then like celebrate even trying. But I feel like in situations where there's something really painful that we're not open about, it's how do I say this? I'll speak from my own experience when there's things where it's like I don't really want to be public about this because I don't want people to validate my own insecurity or make something that's already painful for me to carry additionally painful by
Mm-hmm.
passing a judgment or indicating that they don't really get it. Like one of my things is like I
Mm-hmm.
really want to be understood. We're like ultimately I know at the end of the day I need to understand myself. That's
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one who has to live with me. If somebody doesn't understand me, that's okay. But I feel like when we take that risk and in safe space with people that we trust are able to be vulnerable, my experience, and it sounds like your experience too, is that people kind of gravitate towards that when it's like, oh my gosh, you understand what it's like to deal with this kind of loss. Yeah, me too. I never talk about this, but yes, I have experienced this too. Or like you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
connecting with your friend who has a child with ASD, where it's like, yes, we're navigating an experience it's shared. It doesn't look the exact same, but we're navigating life together, and it just brings this
Mm-hmm.
closeness. And it feels like a life paradox where it's like we want to hold it
Completely.
close to ourselves, but the second that we can open, I'm using a lot of my hands here, listeners,
Yeah.
but that we hold it close to ourselves. But then if we're willing to like show people, so many times trusting other people ends up with both people learning something
Mm-hmm.
and feeling a little bit more connected.
Yes, and you end up getting like so much validation out of it. And I am gonna spin this back to hearing differences specifically. Like
Yeah.
I people most of the time I like to believe always have wonderful intentions. However, some things that you can say to me and my son are extremely hurtful and offensive.
Yeah, will you share
It's
them?
it's crazy. It's crazy the things that people will say to you in public or even people that you have relationships with. My least favorite is old people. I will just go ahead and say old people, your grandmas, your grandpas, whoever, thinking it's cute and fun to tell my son, oh, we're twins. Woo. Which again, I know it's good intention. They're just it's uncomfortable to see a child with something that's different, right? And a lot of the times people don't know what to say. And I totally get that. I myself have found myself in situations where I am seeing something, maybe someone with a physical disability, and you want to say something, but you just don't know what is the right thing to say in that moment. And sometimes you end up saying things that just aren't the right thing. But telling my son that you're his twin when you're 80 years old and my son is a year old, right now, he doesn't even know that you're talking to him. He's more concerned about our Costco sample that we're sharing. However, if he's 5 and you're going to tell him that, like, those are things that are going to impact him. He doesn't want to be twins with an 80-year-old man. He wants to be twins with a 5-year-old classmate
Yeah.
who
And
most
maybe
certainly doesn't.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. Or things like grow his hair out long so he can hide them, or he can wear hats so he can hide them, or like anything associating shame with them, or yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I love I love to talk about it. It's pretty much all I think about all day now is my son, ASL, the deaf community. I've just like totally gone headfirst into this whole culture, and I love talking about hearing differences, especially in kids. And so I love when people in public ask. Like the other day, we were at Costco again, and this guy was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Wow, dude, cool hearing aids! I love the blue." And we're like, "Yeah, we just switched to
Mm-hmm.
blue. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool." And like, ask me questions. Like, I'll have people be like, "Oh, he's wearing hearing aids. Like, so he needs those to help him hear." And I'm like, "Yes, he does actually. Like." How much time do you have? Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. Curiosity is great.
I'm going to respond to the comment from the older people. You know what that says to me? That them saying,
Hmm.
oh, we're twins. So, in my light research around hearing impairment, I wish there was language that wasn't putting the people with the hearing difference in a deficit. So, hearing different.
Yeah.
Um, so it's all so much that came up is people over 75,
Hmm.
older people. Like I'm going to label it like geriatric. Then they
Yeah.
see a little tiny toddler, 18-month-old, and they say, oh, you're my twin. They're not thinking about how that child is going to internalize that. They're thinking about, I don't have to feel as old as I am because I see this child with it. Because I think like that's what, it's a
Yeah.
pretty big marker of a lot of people they don't experience it until
Aging. Yeah,
they're aging, and it's a
totally.
very human thing to be like, I want to backpedal away from
Ah,
like getting old. And so they're thinking about like, look, it's not just me. And really it's not a helpful supportive thing to say. It's 100% about them
yes.
and their own insecurity about like the fact that
Oh,
they're wearing hearing aids.
that is a great perspective, or a great, mind shift. That is a really good point, a very valid point.
It doesn't, I'm not trying in any way to dismiss like how you're feeling or like to remind
No.
people, hey, maybe don't comment. I just kind of try to be like, don't comment on other people's bodies.
Yeah,
It sounds like
seriously.
questions have been helpful and like been like, yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. But I think so
Yes.
many times when people make remarks like that, they're not thinking about the impact on the other person. It is about themselves and their insecurities.
Mm.
So I guess my my note to listeners would be like, maybe just pause or think twice before you make a comment when you see somebody who is differently abled or presenting differently. Maybe you don't need to make a remark that
Yeah.
involves like comparing or even saying anything. Jessi and I are back from our little break, and Jessi, I know that we've been talking a little bit about some of the research that I've conducted. I know you've been immersing yourself in knowledge and trying to soak up as much as you possibly can about this topic. One thing that stood out to me was the fact that more than 90% of children born with hearing loss, like your son, have parents with typical hearing. Do you or your husband, are you both typically, how do you
Yeah.
say, have the same auditory
Yeah.
capabilities?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear perfectly well. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
have anyone in our family that is hearing impaired. And yeah, so like you said, 90% of DHH kids, so deaf, hard of hearing kids, are born to hearing parents. And of that 90%, on average, only 8% of parents make the decision to learn ASL, American Sign Language.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
sorry. I just want
Yeah.
to react to that where that makes me, I know that like in pre-show we talked about this where that just makes me so sad.
Hmm.
So sad.
It's heartbreaking.
I just yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for words, I guess. And I just wanted to make sure that people really heard that. So we have 90% of DHH children have parents that have typical hearing, but only 8% of parents with DHH kids learn ASL. So
So
how do
these
they
children are
communicate?
being, exactly, right? Great question.
What?
These children are being, I mean, like I talked about earlier in the show, as soon as we started going down this road, all you're hearing right out the gate, they failed. They failed.
Mm-hmm.
They failed. Which failure has such a negative annotation to it, right? Like, oh, my child's failing already. Like
Right.
that doesn't sit well with any parent. And so there's already this like kind of icky, I just want to say icky, like
Mm-hmm.
feeling around it, in failure and like something's wrong. And no matter where your children is on that hearing, your child, excuse me, is on that hearing spectrum, there's nothing wrong. There's no failure. I really wish that the narrative could be changed a little bit around that. Like, hey, this test is identifying some hearing differences. Let's
Mm-hmm.
dig into this a little bit further and kind of figure out what's going on. And
Right.
more push on like, there is nothing wrong with this. Being deaf is not a disability. I mean, legally, sure, yeah, but it's not a disability. And most deaf people that you speak to will say the same. Like, it's not a disability.
Mm.
What's a disability is language deprivation, which happens sadly to those children who only 8% of their parents decide to learn ASL. And so much of the medical system is fix, fix, fix. Okay, we're going to get them in hearing aids. Okay, we're going to get them a cochlear implant, which is great because, so going back to that language deprivation, that word, that term I used, language deprivation, I have a direct quote of it here, is a lack of access to natural language during a child's critical period of language acquisition. So in our first, what do they say, like 0 to 5 years of life, our brain is like, think of it like molding clay, like clay. So when you first get your clay, it's fresh, it's really pliable, you can form it into any shapes you want. Those are our first few years of life. As we get older, our brain starts to get firmer, and those skills that are so crucial to learn and use when your brain is so pliable and able to form all these new connections and acquire that language, it's so crucial in that first period. Parents, and it's hard, right? Like you're going through so much at once, you don't know what is the right thing to do, and there's a lot on your plate when you're first getting this diagnosis of your child. But you want your child, if they're able, to be able to receive that auditory stimulation, right? So through hearing aids, through a cochlear implant, right? Because those first few years of development are so crucial. And so in our case, our son can use hearing aids. So hearing loss is a spectrum, right? So you have minimal, moderate, severe, profound, and deaf. So profound kiddos, that's where you'll see cochlear implants placed, is at that profound level. So our son is one step below that, and he utilizes hearing aids. The gene he has can be progressive. But like I said earlier, we still are testing all the time for that to see if it's going to change at all. So you want that auditory stimulation if your kids can have it. And this is kind of where I struggle a little bit, like as a parent and just navigating all of this, because yes, you want them to have that input, but also I've always felt like I don't want to force them on him. And granted, he is
Mm.
a baby, but I want him to have that agency and autonomy over that, over his devices and his hearing. And I have friends now that use hearing aids that are young people that have just, have different hearing. And they've shared with me how it feels like when you go from not having that stimulation in your brain, then to all of a sudden, boom, hearing aids are on. It's like a quick. Now I have all this stimulation and all this information that's being processed in my brain. They've told me they'll feel nauseous, they get headaches, they have to take brain breaks and just take, their cochlears or hearing aids off and just give themselves a minute just to sit. Or maybe one day they just don't feel like processing that much. I mean, for us, it's something we don't even have to think twice about, but that's not the case for everybody.
Mm.
And it can be very overstimulating. So I already have kind of taken an approach with my son. I'm pretty decent at sign language now. I can hold my own at like the deaf meetups and stuff that I go to. I can communicate and get through it. I'm not super great by any means, but hopefully,
Mm.
I'll get there. But I will sign to my son and show him his aids and ask if he wants them. And if he doesn't, I don't put them in. And if he has them in and he takes them out, he's gotten so good about it It was really challenging for a while. He was eating them, he was throwing them, he hated them.
Sounds like he was being a baby.
Yeah, exactly. Which
I
he
know some
still,
little kids who like won't even wear a hat, let
yeah,
alone hearing
yeah.
aids.
He still has his brief moments, but he's gotten very good now. And he'll pull them out and he'll come over and he'll hand them to me and he'll sign all done in
Uh-huh.
ASL to me and let me know he's all done with his hearing aids for now. And I say, okay. And I'll try again in a half hour, an hour, whatever, like depending on what we're doing that day or what he's up to, how he's feeling. I'll offer them again. And if he wants them, cool, here we go. And going back to things that like kind of ruffle my feathers that people can say, like, oh, I don't need to learn sign language because he has hearing aids. And something I've learned in the deaf community is there's deaf with a lowercase d and deaf with an uppercase d. And
Mm.
if anyone from the deaf community listens to this podcast and I say anything incorrectly, please reach out to me and contact me because I'm learning and I'm trying the best I can. But lowercase d deaf is someone who's been legally diagnosed as being deaf. So,
Mm-hmm.
really black and white. Capital D deaf is someone who identifies with the deaf culture, which could be anyone on that spectrum, on that hearing spectrum. And I don't want to try and force my child into any type of box. I want
Mm-hmm.
him to have the agency when he's older and able to make that decision for himself. Who does he want to be? How does he want to identify? And if he wants to lean into that deaf community, most of them choose not to use hearing devices and just lean into that deaf identity and use sign language. And if he wants to do that, I want him to know how to sign. I want him to have already have friends, and just have that at his fingertips. And so to the people that say that to me, like, oh, I don't need to learn ASL, he has hearing aids, I just kind of say, okay, no, but he's not going to be forced to wear them his whole life. So if you can't communicate with him later, that just kind of sucks for you, I guess. Which also on that note, our family's been incredible. We take ASL classes together on Monday nights, and everyone's making an effort to learn, which is like to me now is the greatest act of love or service you could ever do for our family.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's this is totally to the side of what you're saying, Jessi, but when you did all done, I knew that one because I have a ton of friends who have little ones, and it seems like there's a trend. I am not like a historian of like trends in parenting in any way, shape, or form, but it seemed like I know so many people who communicate with their littles using like very light ASL before they can speak.
it's a
And
great tool.
I'm like, oh, I hope that that's creating a world for your son where people have a little more exposure to even
Mhm.
like basic signs. Yeah, just I
I
guess wanted
definitely
to
think
remark on
so.
that. Mhm. Yeah,
And it's actually wonderful for your kids and their development, even if they are typical hearing kids, to teach them some ASL because it still lights up that language acquisition center of the brain and helps. Just, I mean, it's not going to hurt them by any means. It's going to help them developmentally.
so
And it
cool.
helps you as a parent because your child can tell you if they're hungry or they're all done or they want a bath and that's why they're throwing a tantrum, as
Hmm.
opposed to still being nonverbal and you're like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
everyone's and it's crazy.
Hmm. No, that's
um
great.
yeah, it is really helpful. So we had all the baby sign language books, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna do baby signs. And
Hmm.
little did I know that I was someday going to be fluent in ASL.
That's amazing. How life
Yeah.
works that way sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It
Mm.
really is. So, yeah, a lot of these kids suffer from language deprivation, which is a huge issue. Um, and they are forced to not make sacrifices, but what's the word I'm looking for? Accommodate the hearing world. That's what I'm looking for.
Hmm. Hmm.
So their whole day to day looks so different because I actually met this woman at this last deaf meetup that I went to, and we were talking, and she was telling me how, matter of fact, at this meetup that I went to, all of the adults that I spoke to, none of their families learned ASL, and that's how they communicate. That's how I was communicating with them was ASL.
That's
Um,
wild.
it's so sad. And this one lady that I was speaking with, she was telling me that she's like, it's honestly funny because my family refused to learn sign, yet they ended up creating gestures that were used within the house to identify things because, I mean, they needed to communicate. And it's like, at that point, just learn some ASL. Like, I don't,
Yeah, it's easier than probably inventing a language of your own.
right. And talk about like how confusing and hard that has to be for a child because then they're stuck in this limbo of like, where do I belong? Like the hearing world is so different. It's just completely different lived experiences. I mean, when you really stop and think about your world with absolutely no auditory input, it changes the whole way you perceive the world. And it's really hard. You really have to like take a second and like sit with yourself and really put yourself in someone's shoes. And it took me a
Mm-hmm.
while to really kind of imagine like, wow, all these little things that you just don't experience the same way, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
again, I want to say there is nothing wrong with it. It's just different lived experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
especially for a child, like to try to be forced into this hearing world, that creates a huge identity crisis for them. Like, what an extra added layer of something for them to try to navigate in their little developing minds, let alone the language deprivation they're already struggling with, right? They're already missing
Mm-hmm.
out on such a crucial time of development because they're not being given language.
I also, and again, this is not based in research. This is just like me as a human reacting to that. And I guess a little bit of information is coming from I was a high school teacher for 3 years, and I'm like, there's no way a child who is being raised in an environment where they are deprived of language and communication and connection isn't showing up in their community, in school, at their church, and isn't like frustrated beyond means, like all means. Like I can't
Yeah.
imagine like how frustrating. And I know that all like when we as humans are frustrated, we often act out in not always appropriate ways,
Yeah.
and
Or completely withdraw.
or completely withdraw. And that's just, I don't know. That to me, that just shows the ripple impact because then you have an individual who is either withdrawing or maybe acting in a different way. And it's like, well,
Mm.
I think most people would have an adverse reaction
Yeah.
to an environment that doesn't support their ability, their need to communicate. It seems
Yeah.
like it's a human right.
And now I know things have gotten better, you know, in the years. For example, we pretty much as soon as my son got diagnosed, we started having a communication coach. It's through the state that comes to our house twice a month.
Okay.
And the idea is they kind of coach parents on how to communicate with their kiddos. So it
Mm-hmm.
is like it was brought to the attention how big of an issue language deprivation is. And so there are steps being taken and there are resources out there for families and especially like even my girlfriend down in Oregon, it was pretty much the same process for them. I was really curious to hear if they, you know, your child gets put into the state logs of having this disability. And before you know it, people are calling you. And which, on that note, as a mom and a child with any type of medical complexity, I was so grateful navigating all of this that I have a background in healthcare just because it's so overwhelming. You have so many different specialists and appointments and especially those first few months of like getting diagnosed. It's just extremely overwhelming. But again, that's another topic too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that and so there are more resources now for families, and families are presented with more opportunity for them to learn. You know, how
Mm-hmm.
to better communicate with their children, how to provide their children with fulfilling and engagement experiences. But that doesn't always mean that the parents are going to accept it or actually implement it, you know, because your
Mm-hmm.
communication coach is only there for an hour, once or twice a month, depending on how much you have them coming. And are you going to take the time, you know?
Is this something where the question, I guess, is around referral patterns? So when I think about all the things that you've done to educate yourself, I'm also imagining there's a ton of like advocacy that you need to do for your
Mm-hmm.
son. So was
Mm-hmm.
this okay, we have this massive 4-inch book after the audiologist gave us the diagnosis. Was it also here is state supported care, here's I'm going to say speech therapist. I don't know if that's like a correct term or
Yeah.
not, or like
Yeah, it
occupational
is.
therapist that
Yeah.
like you are entitled to, or was it like, all right, I have this diagnosis. I'm going onto the state of Washington website. I'm trying to figure this out. Like, what was
Yeah.
that like?
Yeah. So for the most part, you get approached, which at first was kind
Okay.
of overwhelming. And we were also like, how do you know this? Like, it was kind of creepy. Like, how do you know he's hard of hearing already? This is so bizarre.
We'll be right back. Okay, so Jessi, you were talking about the resources that the state provided and that you were being approached about. Do you mind just continuing what you were sharing?
Yeah, so we had people reaching out. We got to choose an early intervention program to work with, a birth to three program that will help us until our son is of school age to go to preschool, and they help with that transition as well. So while we've had resources being brought to us, I will also say that you absolutely have to piece things together by
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Like you're given a piece to the puzzle, but you're not given all the pieces, like
Yeah.
not even relatively close. And if you want those extra resources and you want to just, I mean, fully understand really what you're in for, and what I mean for that is just the culture as a whole, which I think is so important. And it's not even, it's never talked about. Not one provider that we ever worked with even mentioned it. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you should look into this. Like, no. So yes, you're given these resources, but in my opinion, it's not full circle and it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot on my own, and especially just educating myself on how I can better advocate for my son, especially when we get to preschool and kindergarten and just navigating school. I pretty much anytime I get connected with any type of professional or anyone with any experience in um, like deaf education at all, like a preschool
Mm-hmm.
teacher, an interpreter, anyone who's even been inside that world, I'm asking them for all the inside scoops on everything, because I mean that's how I'm gathering my information, and it's worked out really well for me so far.
Mm-hmm. This
So,
feels like a really good example too of people will hear me say we never know how our experience will benefit others, and that's why this podcast is called Uniquely Qualified, because each of us is uniquely qualified to share our own experiences. But if somebody had the experience of I had this baby, we went through all these tests, now what? There are people like you that are seeking out community in the deaf community. They'll be like, okay, lesson learned, ask this question, make sure that like these
mhm,
people are sharing their notes with one another. You're going to want to think about this. Or like you, it sounds like
totally.
you've really had to do a bunch of self-educating, but like we can maybe
Yes.
help one another.
Yes, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to find community right away, which we are kind of the minority. It's not super common to have a child with hearing differences, but we are out here, and I
Mm-hmm.
am always looking for, new relationships, and especially for my son and anyone really with a child with hearing differences. I think just surrounding them with other children that also have hearing differences is really important, so that they can see like there's nothing wrong with us. Because while I know there's nothing wrong with my son, and I'm going to preach that to him sun up
Mm-hmm.
to sundown, he's going to feel different. And
Mm-hmm.
it would be foolish for me to say he's not. He's going to have moments where he wants to fit in completely in the hearing world. And we are going to have hard conversations, and there's going to be hard times. But I think just providing them as well with that community is going to be crucial. And I don't know, right? Like, I'm a first time mom. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
first time mom of a hearing impaired child. I don't know. My biggest hope is that when he grows up, he just knows that I was trying the best I could, like that I was doing everything I possibly could and everything that I thought was best for him. And I just hope that he sees that someday and feels that in his heart and never feels like I pushed anything on him or, you know, forced him
Mm-hmm.
into anything. Like that is something I never want him to feel.
That's so loving. I love your mama love. That's really
It's
beautiful.
real.
Yeah.
People tell you all the time, like, you're going to love him. You're going to love your children more than you've ever loved anything before. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay, sure, can't wait. And I always wanted to be a mom. But once you have a child, you get it. And I honestly don't think there's a word for it. Love doesn't
Um,
suffice. It's more than that,
yeah, that's so
more than
sweet.
love. Yeah.
I love that. So, do you were making, sorry, let me back that thought up. So, talk to me a little bit about the decisions that your family is going to have to make about education for your son.
Oh, yeah. So he can go to a general education school. And when I say that, it's just the school down the street, right? There's no reason he can't go. Or any other deaf or hard of hearing child, a lot of them do go to general education schools. However, with that, in my personal opinion, it comes more barriers and things that you have to navigate, and also just more of like a social emotional impact on him that if can be avoided, I think would be best. As a kid, especially a preteen, right? Like you want to fit in. You do. Like it's undeniable.
It's human nature, and it's what's kept us, like when we were pack animals and living in our clans, like that's what kept us safe, is like fit in with the community. My community keeps me safe. So it's how we're
Yeah.
wired. It's how we're wired.
Yeah, you want to fit in. You don't want to be the different one and have him, with accommodations and sitting in the front of the class and the teacher wears a device and he has an interpreter and I don't know. I think that would be more emotionally challenging for him. So we had no idea at all, but turns out we live very close to two of some of the best deaf schools. It's funny, these things you have no idea that are just existing around you
Yeah.
until you're kind of thrust into it. So we have some options. For preschool, it's a little different. He does have to test below average for his peers to go to the deaf preschool, which I hope all the listeners are saying, wait, what? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
what I said the first time.
Yeah.
Why have a deaf preschool if you're not going to let deaf and hard of hearing children into the preschool? But no, they have to basically be failing already before they've even reached school age to be allowed to go to this preschool. I can't even pay to send him. Now, once he's of like true school age, right, like kindergarten, first grade, we can waiver him into this school. He can go to this school. It's going to be fine. But in terms of preschool, which really bothers me because we're at home all day together and I'm teaching him ASL, and then I'm going to send him off to this school when he's 3, and it's going to have to be a general ed preschool. So he's not going to be exposed to any sign language. He's going to struggle to process and even receive information because it looks a lot different for him. And in the chaotic preschool class setting,
Yeah.
it's not realistic. So then again, just comes this our communication coach comes from the school system. She's a deaf educator and she herself is severely hearing impaired. Actually, hers is progressive now. She has progressed to profound hearing loss now, and she still uses her hearing aids. And her and I have a lot of conversations about this. She knows I'm really emotionally invested in my son and especially his educational experience. And she always laughs at me because she's like, he's only a year old and you're asking more questions than most of my parents that their kids are about to graduate out of program. But I just want him to be successful. But
Mm-hmm.
she has just kind of braced me because she knows I am very emotionally involved in this and I just cry a lot, to be honest. She's like, you're going to have some hard times. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, our school system is not programmed to promote success right out the gate, especially in our deaf, hard of hearing community. It's all reactive. There's no
Mm-hmm.
proactive measures being taken. Sure, yes, you can come at me and say, oh, they have an IEP and like they have these things in place to help them succeed, but that's not the case. Like they're not going to be provided these resources until there's documented failure. So then comes in more of this impact on your child of right out the gate hearing more of that fail word. They're a
Mm-hmm.
failure, right? And so now they
Mm-hmm.
need these resources. How is that going to psychologically impact a child? Not
Yeah.
well. That
Right.
doesn't make them want to succeed. That doesn't make them want to try harder and excel.
No.
You feel good when you're doing good, and being told that you're failing right off the bat, I mean, that's going to have an impact on these children. And they're finally now in research just starting to look at this and look at those other more emotional factors of putting these hearing impaired children into general ed classrooms and take that into account and have it not reflect in such a what's a proper terminology, like didactic, you're passing,
Mm.
you're failing kind of
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint, which is incredible. And I hope that that is taken more seriously moving forward. So,
What's bananas to me about that, and again, I was a teacher for 3 years, had students with IEPs. My mom's a kindergarten teacher, my sister's an elementary school educator. And with there's some things with like child development where I understand they need to hit certain milestones for it to be like, okay, now we can assess you for AS autism or ADHD or OCD or like any number of these
mhm.
things where there's like an evaluation around like, I'm gonna say behavior, and like I'm doing my best here, people. So like if I'm saying the wrong word, it's meant with best intentions. But what I'm trying to get at is that Jesse's son and other little kids who are hard of hearing, that's documented already. why,
Right.
like it's bananas to me is okay, this is already documented. They're already working on it, but there has to be failure anyway. And then I
Mm-hmm.
also just think about like what we know about child preparedness for kindergarten, for first grade. We want children to go to preschool, like
Mm-hmm.
exposure and being in it like before it's like the real deal of elementary school, like being exposed to like your letters and your numbers and how to form a line, all these things that we
Mm-hmm.
learn in like in preschool. Like, if you don't get that, you come so far from behind. And so I'm just thinking
Mm-hmm.
about your son and other children like him, where I'm like, wow, this system is not built for this. And
No.
like, okay, keep him out. That doesn't seem like an option because it needs to get exposure. Put him in, okay, but then he's failing, and that's his first exposure to the education system. And that nobody wants to be like fail, 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 fail. Like even with
Yeah.
all the love and support, that's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
And that's what I've
unfortunate.
really expressed with our communication coaches. I don't want his first experience to be failure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And she's also explained to me too, like a lot of the times it is harder for children that aren't legally diagnosed as deaf. So
Mm-hmm.
our child can't hear like vocal tones where he falls on that spectrum, but he's not diagnosed as legally deaf. And so she said a lot of the times it gets really hairy because, you know, as a child, what if he decides not to use his hearing aids, or what if there's a lot of background noise and people just assume that they're getting information when they're not.
Oh
And then
yeah.
they just end up getting really lost in the sauce and more failure, more
Mm-hmm.
failure. I mean, we will have some bridges to cross when we get to the school system.
Mm.
But I'm ready. I tell you what, I'm
Yes,
ready.
Jesse's
I'm
ready.
ready.
That's great. Your son has such a supportive and loving mama. It's so beautiful to see.
Thank you so much. That's like truly the best compliment I could
Mm.
ever receive. On the note of him hearing information but maybe not receiving it all the way, I kind of wanted to use this platform as a way to just spread awareness. I know it's not super common, you know, to interact with someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, but it does happen, and just like etiquette and ways that you can be more respectful.
Hmm.
And yeah, so like my whole family, we just all learned about dinner table syndrome, which is
Hmm.
really, it's really sad when you hear it and you think about it. And I actually have a link to share with you to put in the show notes of
Oh,
a TED
thank you.
talk by a woman
Okay.
who she's deaf, and just the way she explains living in a hearing world and like her having to accommodate to other people, but no one accommodating to her, and just kind of feeling like, you know, you're sitting, so dinner table syndrome, you're sitting at the dinner table and you can tell that there's like a really emotionally heavy conversation going on and everyone's talking, but you have no idea what is being said and you're completely left out of these conversations, and it's your family. Like that hurts, you know? And of course it's not intentional, but it's just that having that awareness, and especially if some with someone who's hard of hearing versus deaf, right? If you know that your aunt is deaf and she can't hear anything at all, you probably, I would hope, have learned some ASL and you can talk with your aunt because you love her. And if you haven't, you probably have some other form of communication that you're using with her. But for someone that is hard of hearing or uses a hearing device, there's this general assumption like, oh, they're getting all of this, they're good. Um, but dinner tables, like think of Thanksgiving, right? Like it's noisy. Maybe the lighting's not great. Maybe you're at a round table and you can't have eye contact and you can't see everyone's faces while they're speaking. And next thing you know, I mean, you have no idea what is being talked about. And you're seeing people have these emotional responses, and you're just sitting there feeling like a total loner at your own family's dinner table because you can't keep up with the conversation that's happening. So, on that note, you know, maintaining eye contact, not speaking over each other, shutting off the TV in the background, shutting off the music. We don't need the music in the background. And just being more intentional with your delivery, especially if they do have hearing devices, like making sure that they have eye contact and they know that you're talking to you before you begin talking. Don't turn away when you're talking to someone. Don't walk away when you're talking to them. Speak slow and clear. Don't talk with your mouth full, which I hope you don't do that anyways.
Mm.
And you know, maybe learn some basic signs, like if you know someone, or if you want to be able to be that ally when you're out in public and you see someone who's deaf, and just to be able to give them some basic communication. Yeah. And like we kind of talked about pre-show, I have people all the time tell me now, like, oh, I want to learn ASL. I'm going to learn ASL, but like, I need to take this college class. Like, that's the first thing you
Mm-hmm.
need to do. Like, you need to go take this very official class and like
Mm-hmm.
totally dedicate yourself to it. And I didn't even do that. I mean, now
Mm-hmm.
I want to because I want to learn more. So it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
People, I think, make it out to be this bigger task than it needs to be. And I've been telling people lately, like, so what I have found, I have signed up for some courses and stuff online, and they honestly weren't very helpful for me. And what's been most helpful is I just sign all day to my son. And when I don't know how to sign something, I look it up really quickly on YouTube. My guy Bill, who I'll share his information with you all, has like literally a 6-second video of him signing that one word. Boom, I sign it a
Mm-hmm.
couple times. I usually retain it. If you take 2, 3 minutes out of your day, learn one sign a day. By the end of the month, you'll know 30 signs. You don't need to overcomplicate it, you know? Don't necessarily do it while you're driving, but watch the video. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually practice signing while I'm driving. I just talk to myself, but and like sign it, you know? Like I
Mm-hmm.
practice, I have fake conversations in the car and I sign them and I'm like, wait, how would you actually say that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and on the note of ASL, people oftentimes think that it translates straight to English, like it is a form of English, and it's
Mm.
not. It is its
Oh,
complete own language. It has its complete own grammatical structure, and it actually does not translate to English at all, which I thought was really fascinating when I learned
that's
that.
fascinating. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Interesting. So I guess I have two reactions to that. One, I didn't even think about it. I'm wearing this all or something sweatshirt
I love that.
that former guest of the podcast Shannon gave to me as a part of this journey. All or something. And so that's you exemplified that value by saying, you don't have to just get like a bachelor of science in ASL. You can literally start with YouTube and like with anything, a little bit will compound if you just like keep with it and learn like one word a day. The other thing that came to mind, and this didn't come up for me before when you and I were talking pre-show, but what came up for me now was like just how you used YouTube to acquire ASL. I was thinking about my family and I, we were very fortunate. I was able to go to France this summer and none of us speak French. And we were fine in Paris, but then you get out of the city and it's and also we are the kind of people like we do not expect people to speak English to us. But what did we
Yeah.
do? We pulled up Google Translate and we were able to oftentimes just by passing the phone back and forward communicate that way. And just so I
Hmm.
guess what I'm thinking of is like you're in an experience, you're somewhere, and somebody who clearly is like signing. Like there's ways that we can use technology for us to be able to communicate with somebody if we just get creative and
Hmm.
to be
Completely.
like just and work like and if somebody needs help you probably can use a piece of technology between the two of you to figure out like if they need directions or something. I guess I don't have it like an immediate example that comes to mind, but even just thinking about YouTube or like if somebody's signing something and you're like you look up YouTube on YouTube like bathroom, like are you looking for the bathroom,
Yeah.
like or, do you know what I'm saying? Is that coming through? Like
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Or even
And
like a note on the
honestly,
phone, like if somebody speaks, like if they're speaking English, you could be like, "Do
that's
you
what I
need
was
help with
just gonna
something?"
say.
Okay, sorry,
That's what I was just gonna
sorry.
say. Yeah, so many deaf individuals, I mean, their whole life is built around accommodating to the hearing world, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're not accommodating to them, and
Right, right,
they
right.
still have every right to engage in the world just as us. Why shouldn't they? I actually was up at the mountain this summer and ran into a deaf couple, and I saw that they needed some help, and so I walked up to them, and before I even started signing, they had already had their phones whipped out and were typing to me, and I just
Oh
kind of
yeah,
patted them down, and I said, "No, no, no, no,
yeah.
no. Let's talk. Come on, talk to me."
Oh,
And
were they so
they were
surprised?
they were so
Sorry.
surprised and they were so happy. And do you know what? That was also actually my first interaction with someone who's deaf blind.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it was beautiful.
Mm.
I walked away with my mind truly blown. This gentleman cupped my hands while I was signing and knew everything I was signing. We had a conversation, and he's deaf and blind, and he just would lightly place his big man hands on top of mine and just feel every little movement I was making with my hands and knew exactly what I was signing.
Incredible.
That's crazy.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Incredible. That's an amazing memory that you have. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
I walked away like, and I mean, that's all he knows, right? He doesn't know how incredible he is, but I'm like, wow, for your mind
Yeah.
to be able to process that input, it's crazy. And just because someone is deaf, it doesn't mean that they're not receiving, their brains are still still firing. Like they're way back in the day,
Yes.
they used to be referred to as deaf dumb, which absolutely does not make any sense at all. I just listened to this podcast and they talked about the neuroscience of deafness, and
Hmm.
I'll share it with you so you can share it with the listeners too.
Thank you. Yeah.
But they were doing scans on the brain while being shown visual stimulation to a visual language to a deaf person and auditory stimulation to a hearing person, in the same part of the brain that processes typically just auditory input and stimulation was firing up on the deaf individuals when shown visual language. So that part of their brain wasn't wasted. It's just like double time. It's
Yeah.
still firing and processing language. It's just a different sense of input, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes, that makes sense. And I'll just say incredible again. That's just so cool. Like the human brain is just so unbelievably cool and beautiful. And I also want to make sure that listeners know that when I'm like, whoa, that's incredible, I'm not trying to be like, I'm tokenizing this person who was visually impaired and hard of hearing, but just to be like, that is so amazing that that person's brain learned this is how I can communicate with people by feeling every little nuance in the movement of sign language. And
They
that's what
adapt.
I mean. Yeah, because
Yeah,
I
they
feel like
adapt.
often people who are not I'm gonna just use the word typical again, they're like, wow, you're so inspirational. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just a person that is existing and trying to do the best. And maybe they are. And maybe there is like,
Yeah.
but I feel like I've heard in like commentary around like how in our culture some people are ableist without even realizing. It's like, wow, that's so cool that you're in a wheelchair. That's so inspiring. It's like, you don't know anything about me, sir.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I hope the spirit of what I'm saying is coming through. So that just
Completely.
like
Yeah.
that's just amazing. All of that is just so cool where it's like the human brain is able to do so much, and by having that input like you were saying, it's actually lighting up the auditory part of the brain. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's wild.
Yeah, I'll link that, or I'll send you that podcast to link. And if you're nerdy and you like to hear about the human brain, she does a great job explaining it. She keeps it kind of lighthearted, but it's all science based. And yeah, just talking about, and they actually studied people with the same gene that my son has, gene JGB2, that presents with deafness.
JGB2.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically affects the proteins in the ear where the cochlea nerve is. And I could probably be butchering this, and I'm sorry if I am, but yeah, so it just presents with deafness, and again, a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So some kids that have it are born completely deaf, some have minimal hearing loss, some have moderate, severe, and yeah, in some
Mm-hmm.
kids it can progress as well. And it's hereditary. So both, or it's genetic. So both my son or my husband and I have to have this gene present in us for it to have presented in our child, which is so crazy. So it's a recessive gene. So somewhere in both of our families, this gene has been present. It's just never presented in anyone we've known in our lifetimes. And yeah, so now any future children we have to have a 25% chance of being born with that deafness gene. Which honestly, I'm like, you know what? If there are going to be deaf babies in the world, bring them all to me because we are
Yeah,
ready. We are
Jessie's
ready to
ready.
rock and roll.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love
We're
that
going
so
to
much.
give them everything they need.
We need to have more people in the world like you.
That's a very flattering compliment. Thank you.
It's true. Well, is there anything else you want to make sure that we share before I go to my final three questions that I ask every guest?
No, I think my biggest thing that I just want to share with listeners is again, reiterating that being deaf is not a disability, language deprivation is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't be intimidated if you see someone who's deaf in public. We're all
Mm-hmm.
just humans,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just be kind, I think
Mm-hmm.
is my biggest thing. Just be kind.
Be kind. Yes,
And it's
I
okay
love
to be
that.
curious. Like I said earlier, it's okay to be curious. And I love to talk about my son and his hearing loss. I genuinely love to talk about it, and I love to
Mm-hmm.
answer questions, and I love when people are curious and they want to
Mm-hmm.
know. but just doing it in a kind way. And even I would rather someone even just say, like, if I saw someone in public, I would rather them just be honest and say, like, wow, I've never seen a kid with hearing aids before, and I don't really know what to say right now, but I'm very curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
I, and this might not sit with another parent with a hard of hearing child, but for me, that approach, I'm like, yeah, I'm so glad you had the courage to say something like, let me educate you a little bit, as opposed to making some like silly comment, you know?
Are I guess this is kind of a two-part question, but are there ways of approaching with like respect and curiosity? I mean, I guess you just described one, but something where you're like, oh, I've really appreciated this, or that you've heard as you've really immersed yourself in the deaf community, where it's like, I appreciate when people do XYZ.
Yeah. So, well, within the deaf community, everyone's really blunt. And that kind
Mm,
of has to do more with just the language itself. But like, there's no beating around the bush in the deaf community. Like, if they don't like something, you're going to know it. If they think you look bad, you're going to know it. They're just very blunt
yeah.
people. And yeah, I think just what I previously said, just being honest. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm curious and I don't know how to ask, but I'm really curious and I'd like to know more.
Mm-hmm.
That to
So
me is respectful and tells me like, you're just curious. There's nothing
yeah.
wrong with curiosity.
Right. What it also says is I see you and I'm not like I'm going to pretend I'm not seeing.
Yeah, or prolonged staring that, oh, I get
Oh,
so irritated. I'm
lurking.
like,
Yeah.
would you like to take a
Yeah.
photo? I
Do you
mean,
have a
don't, because
do
that's
you have a
creepy.
right,
But
please don't. Right.
also,
Also,
sorry, one thing I did forget to say was when I first went to a deaf meetup, I learned so much about the hearing world and myself. So when you go to deaf meetups, it's voices off, and most of the time, well, at least again, these are my personal experiences, but I have yet to meet a deaf individual that when I tell them like my ASL is bad, I'm learning, I'm here because I have a son that, you know, is using ASL, and they're so incredibly welcoming and just so excited that I'm learning, and they're also helpful and like give me contact info, and like we
hmm
Marco Polo and sign with each other, and they want to help me succeed. But I learned quickly how beautiful the deaf community is in the sense that like everything is very intentional. You know, our hearing world, we're constantly speaking over one another, we're cutting each other off. My husband and I are so guilty of this. We've been working on it, talking to each other from different rooms, like yelling, like, "Hey, did you pull that meat out of the freezer?"
hmm
Or walking away from someone as you're speaking, and I noticed that so quickly at this first deaf meetup I went to. Like the eye contact is very intentional, the delivery is very intentional. There is no interrupting each other. It just isn't a thing. In my first conversation with a woman, there were children there, and I got distracted because a toddler was running by, and I looked away for, you know, what felt like a second, and I felt so terrible because I missed what she was saying to me completely, and I had to have her say it again. And I just remember driving home like, wow, the hearing world, we're all just kind of jerks. Like we're all
mm,
always in a rush to get our words out. We want to talk louder than the other person that's speaking because we feel like what we have to say is more important or whatever it may be. I just had a lot of really powerful takeaways from that. And I sense have changed the way I communicate. And I also have more friends now that use hearing devices or are deaf, but mainly for those that use hearing devices. You do have to be more intentional in the way you communicate with them, you know, making sure you have their attention and their eye contact. And yeah, so just food for thought for
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, no, that's just great to know. And I love that you've been doing the work to learn as much as you can. And also, I think there's a big difference too in I'm learning, I'm sitting behind my computer screen, I'm learning ASL, or I'm talking to my son, as opposed to I'm gonna go to as a person that exists in the hearing world just fine, go to a voices off deaf meetup. Like that is like immersing yourself. So you're
Yeah,
in it, mama.
it was nerve wracking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm
Well, thank you. That was it. That was my last piece. I just wanted to make
Thank
sure that I
you.
shared with everybody.
No, I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did. I love that just so much. Are you ready for the last three questions that I ask every guest?
I am. Let's hear them.
Okay. All right, Jessi. If you could go back to when you learned of your son's diagnosis, what would you say to the younger version of yourself?
My gosh. I, throughout this whole experience, never once had a provider. And I'm specifically going to say providers because you have many specialists that you go to and see. And like I said many times already, it's very overwhelming and you're just being told something's wrong, there's failure. I never once had a professional tell me he's going to be okay. You're going to
Mm,
be okay. This is okay. Like, I just wish so badly that someone would have grabbed, fragile little me, like by the hand and said, like, it's all fine. I mean, really, it's not a big deal. Like, you're all going to be okay. I really could have used that from somebody.
yeah. Yeah. It is, and it is going to be okay. And feel like every day you're
Yeah.
proving that to yourself.
Yeah, it is
Mm.
okay. We're great. I can hear my son right now partying
Mm.
in the living room with my husband, and he's more than okay. We are
Yeah.
thriving.
Oh, okay. Question two. What has been the most helpful tool or resource in navigating this challenge?
I hate to say it because it's so basic, but YouTube. I will
Yeah.
make sure that I share Bill's channel with you so that anyone that wants to learn ASL can do it. He is a college professor and he is deaf, and he teaches ASL, and it's all free on his YouTube channel. He breaks everything down into lessons, but then he also has really short little clips, like I said, that are like 6 seconds long. So if you're on the go and you just want to learn one word really quick, you can. Or if you have 30 minutes and you want to sit down and do a lesson, you can. And just the way he delivers it, like he introduces a sign, he'll introduce like 5 signs and then he'll use them in sentences over and over and then present it in different ways, like you guess the sign or you sign it first. And it's just, out of all the things I've tried, which I've tried many, it's been the way I've retained it the best.
Mm,
And then our communication coach is lovely, and again, she's from our birth to three intervention, so it's not really something I can share with people, but if anyone is going through this and they want to contact me, they can. And yeah, I think
yeah.
that's probably it.
Yeah. And for guests, you can, if you don't know Jessi in real life, that you could contact me at the end of the podcast. I'm going to share out some ways that you can get a hold of me. And I will promise you that if you're looking for help from Jessi, we'll make sure that you get it from her.
Yes, I actually there is a program in Washington called Hands and Voices, and they provide mentorship for families that are going through this kind of stuff. And I said I would be a mentor, and I actually got my first family, and they have a
No
6 month old,
way.
and it's been really cool to be able to just give back a little bit
Oh
and
my
tell that
gosh.
mama it's okay, because I needed
Yes.
that. And so I'm like, first
You,
off, it is okay. It's
yes.
not a big deal.
Oh my gosh. You're being the change you wish to see in the world. That's amazing.
Amen. Yes.
Okay, this is the last question. And I think we've been touching on it throughout, but if you could say anything to someone out there who is relating to your story, what would you say to them?
Well, now I sound like a broken record. It's
No,
okay.
it's
It's
okay.
okay. And
It's okay.
lean into it and find community. That's
Mhm.
been the biggest thing for me with, I mean, of course, my language acquisition, like learning sign and becoming more fluent. That's been the biggest thing, is just immersing myself and then finding community. Other parents that are navigating this, especially once we get into school age, I know is going to be even more important, and providing your kiddo too with other peers and just really try and find your community.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you,
And
Liz.
thank you so much for being a guest of Uniquely Qualified. I'm just truly grateful that you would take the time and just show your love for your son by being willing to share that with me and with our listeners. So just thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, Liz, thank you for giving me a platform to be able to speak on this. I was one of the 90% of parents that had never met a deaf or hard of hearing individual before, and the first one I meet is my child. To
Yeah.
be able to share and spread awareness, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Well, I'm so glad to have had you.
Thank
And
you, Liz.
so, for our listeners, I know Jessi mentioned some links and some resources. We're going to make sure to have that for you both in show notes. So you'll be able to find it on Spotify. And I'm going to make sure that the week that this episode is published, that we'll make that available on Instagram too. And if you don't already follow us on Instagram, our handle is Uniquely Qualified Pod. And so, again, the week that we have Jessi's episode featured, we're going to have those resources, but we're also going to be sharing other things that relate to the spirit of stuff that we've talked about, like be kind. Sharing a safe space can be helpful, and talking with somebody about what you're going through can be part of the healing process. So, if you or somebody you know would like to share your story of having a loved one with hearing impairment or anything that Jessi or I have talked about today that relates to you, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can slide into the DMs of Uniquely Qualified Pod. You also can email me at uniquelyqualifiedpod@gmail.com. I'd be happy to just connect with you, but also if you're feeling compelled to share your story, please, I welcome it. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. And please remember, each of us is uniquely qualified.